Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out after lunch. I'm Silvia Cubiña, the director and curator of the Basel Museum of Art, right across the street, almost, here in Miami Beach. And this is Isaac Julien, the artist that we're presenting that we inaugurated last night. Isaac?
Hi, yes. Sort of, as it were, sort of going to be discussing with Silvia some of the premises of the exhibition, which maybe you've seen or will get to see.
So let's start sort of from the beginning, and we'll jump around a little bit. The Basel Museum was founded in 1963 with a collection that John and Joanna Bass donated to the city of Miami Beach. And it was a collection of Renaissance and Baroque paintings, sculptures, tapestries, all of that. I started about 2 years ago at the museum, and one of the things that I've been doing is looking at contemporary art through the lens of the collection and vice versa. So looking at how collections have been treated in museums, how contemporary art looks back to the collection, and all of that. So lots and lots of thinking about that. And of course, that took me very quickly to Isaac, who's done a lot of work thinking about ways that art is presented, and why and who and how art is presented in museums. And of course, a lot of you know his work, Vagabondia and Baltimore. So I think Isaac should talk about his intervention into the collection and how Vagabondia and Baltimore are installed at the museum, and you'll get an idea of sort of where this exhibition starts.
But of course, when I sort of got the very kind invitation from Silvia to share at the Basel Museum, the first space we went into was the Renaissance gallery, and as you know, it has this fantastic Renaissance collection in this Salon hang. And I think one of my first sort of thoughts was that there would be a piece of work which I made connected to Baltimore called Fin de Siècle, which essentially is a work of 7 photographs where I photographed black wax models from the Great Blacks in Wax Museum, the back of their heads looking at Renaissance paintings in the Waters Art Gallery Renaissance Gallery. And what I've done is to basically install the work, as it were, next to several of the paintings in the Renaissance Gallery. And there's a sort of play between photography and painting, because the images are mainly photographs taken from the Waters Art Gallery Renaissance collection. And so there's this sort of play, if you like, between the kind of installation of the Salon hang of the Renaissance paintings and the interplay between this photographic series I made. And then sort of next door to it, there's a fantastic red room. And what we did was to install Vagabondia, a piece of work which I made in 2000, shot at the Sir John Soane Museum in London, a fantastic, eccentric house museum. Sir John Soane, architect, 18th century, who designed the Bank of England and many other prestigious institutions, including the red telephone boxes, which used to be part of a very iconic sort of architectural feature in London. And his museum has this amazing eclectic collection from the Grand Tour. And Vagabondia is essentially a piece of work which has a Creole curator who basically works in the museum, and we hear many ruminations of her basically, as it were, sort of daydreaming Sir John Soane back into the space, and also other various black 18th century characters. And this is overlaid with a Creole voiceover narrated by my mother, and it's a double screen mirrored piece which in a sense mirrors some of the architectural features in the Sir John Soane Museum itself, which uses lots of concave mirrors and lots of motifs which are kind of mirroring and doubling the space itself. And it's shown in this kind of red room, which already existed as a kind of red room next to Renaissance gallery in the Basel Museum. And then further in this same wing of the Basel Museum, there's the installation of a single screen work that I made in 2003 called Baltimore. And Baltimore, which was shot in the Waters Gallery in Museum, stars Melvin Van Peebles. You may be familiar with him. He made a film called Sweet Sweet Back's Badass Song in 1971, and he's a sort of black sort of icon for African American cinema in the US. And I made a documentary in 2002 called Badass Cinema, which looked at the history of black exploitation films to Quentin Tarantino. I sort of made this film on the back of a course that I taught at Harvard between 1998 to 2002. And in the winter of 2002, I shot this piece of work in the Waters Art Gallery, where I was able to, through very kind consideration from the Great Blacks in Wax Museum, to get their black wax works and to place those into the gallery of the Renaissance room at the Waters Art Gallery, and hence this kind of frisson between waxworks and artworks began in this piece of work which explores Baltimore as a sort of science fiction film gone wrong. And so basically all of these endeavors are very my way of sort of curatorially intervening into sort of art history, if you like, and playing with the codes and playing with the sort of ways in which we kind of perhaps take for granted these histories, and playing with the idea of memorialization and audience. To my mind, the Great Blacks in Wax Museum, which is a fantastic museum, but if you looked at it in one way, it could be like a Thomas Hirshon installation gone wrong. It has an incredible kind of memorializing resource to it, and it's the way that sort of the African American community in Baltimore was memorializing its past. And the Waters Art Museum, that fantastic collection that it has, is also a way of sort of Baltimore, which has this incredible kind of 18th century presence architecturally, of memorializing its past to Europe, and of course the relationship to sort of art history, if you like. And so there was this sort of play in the pieces, and this was the beginning really of the kind of collaboration between Silvia and I in making this exhibition at the Bass, to install these works in that space, and to, in a way, start this kind of journey of making an exhibition.
So it sort of started there, and then we kept going and going. It just really, we just kept adding things because it became this sort of rich exercise. How far do we take this? How much do we want to say? I think last installation day, we looked at each other and said, what have we done? How is it that, you know, that this really became a very much of an all-encompassing exhibition? We were looking at a lot of things. So from that area right there, you go into the third film of the exhibition, which is really in the lobby area. And one of the things that I think, and Isaac can talk more about it, is the relationship, and this I didn't really see this, Isaac saw it first, maybe I just kind of blanked it out, but the beach, I guess those of us who live here don't really look at palm trees and beach that much, but the work that is there is Paradise Omeros that Isaac will talk about, and it has to do with the Caribbean and all that tropical duality that goes on with immigrants. But that is pretty much almost at the door. So this relationship between the outside and the inside was interesting to Isaac. Do you want to talk to us about Paradise Omeros?
But of course, you know, Silvia suggests in Paradise Omeros a piece of work which is shot in St. Lucia, which is an island, part of the Windward Islands in the Caribbean, an island which changed hands between the English and the French almost sort of 14 times, which has this very rich Creole language and culture because of that, is really the starting point in terms of the placement of the work in the Basel Museum, which, as Silvia says, is literally the first thing you encounter, because in it, of course, you have this iconography of the beach, and of course, for me, when I come to Miami, and sort of most sort of Europeans or black Europeans come to Miami, we think of the beach, of course, because it's snowing in London very heavily now. I thought this would be a fantastic sort of complement to really thinking about the sort of proximity that Miami has to the Caribbean, and this piece of work which I collaborated with Derek Walcott, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature for his book Omeros. And I sort of bothered him for about a year to collaborate with me on this project, and he sort of wrote a poem for the film, and this piece of work was part of a presentation for Documentary 11 and was shown as a free screen work. In this presentation, it's a single screen, which I think sort of works very well in relationship to the architecture of the space, but also resonates with the kind of theme of the exhibition, which is connected to the Caribbean Network, which is a Puma platform for promoting sort of the relationship between creativity in the Caribbean and elsewhere. And so it was a kind of neat kind of fit, really.
Yeah, yeah. So then as you go up to the upstairs of the exhibition is what we call rather the pièce de résistance, no? Then we have the U.S. premiere of 10,000 Waves, which is your last work. Do you have images you're putting up?
Yeah, I wonder if I could put the images now. That'd be fantastic.
So we're very pleased to be showing this work, which is extremely elaborate, and I think there's no way to experience it, and not that of course I'm going to push for all of you to go and visit the show, but when you're inside of the work is really the way, because even looking at the images like I've been looking at for the past 11 months, once you're inside the work is when you really get the idea of how you're enveloped in this world of moving image and sound. But you can describe it better.
Yes, I'm sort of just trying to sort of get to some of the images, and here we have an image from the work called Blue Screen Goddess, and then this sort of photograph is called Waves, which has Gong Fugan, who is a master calligrapher who introduces the film. And then we have an image of the Green Screen Goddess, who is a Maggie Chong stunt look-alike, who performs all the various sort of wire tricks within the film. And then we have an image here called Chameleon of Zhao Tao, who stars in the work, who's a little bit like a sort of young Tilda Swinton of Asia.
Now, I'm going to interject. As you've seen, all of his Isaac's projects are really vast collaborations with Martin Van Peebles and different writers and poets. Can you touch upon that? Because you're going from image to image, but it's really interesting to see how you constructed this whole project around all this fabulous talent.
Well, one of the things really in terms of making projects, and perhaps a bad habit that I've continued from making films, because I made films in the sort of early 90s, feature films, some which were shown at Cannes and won prizes, and then deflected from the film world into the art world. And one of the reasons why I did that was because I originally started as a painter, but I really felt very strongly about trying to make works which would have some sort of deeper collaborative spirit connected to making images. And Maggie Chong, who has her back to us in this image, has been someone who's also had this very much longer experience of making films in Hong Kong cinema, over 75 films, who decided to retire after she won the prize for Clean at the Cannes Film Festival in 2004. And most people were very fascinated by the fact that she almost came out of retirement to work with me on this project. And the reason why she did it, she said, was that she only would have to work with me for 2 days filming. And I think part of that attitude was really connected to the fact that in the film industry you have a certain way of working, a certain mode of ethics, of sort of making something which is connected to a very strong economical drive. And she was very fascinated in collaborating with me because of this relationship to art in the piece. And that's been the basis for being able to attract many people, like Melvin Van Peebles and indeed Tilda Swinton on Derek, where basically she worked with me because it was essentially a film about a director who she had worked with in the early stages of her career, and she knew that this was not a commercial work of any kind. And so that's been partly the basis of being able to get many people to work on the projects. And so just sort of moving on, I'm trying to get to the installation images as I'm sort of sorting through the photographic works. And here we have an essay by Mark Nash on the installation. And here we have an image from Shanghai, from the Sydney installation. I have to say the installation of the work looks a lot better here, though. No offense to people here from Sydney. But with each installation, you're able to sort of meditate and to, in a way, improve on sort of the conditions for installing the work and to develop that way of installing. But the 9-screen way of working really developed from making a work that would somehow navigate the spectator in an architectural kind of world or framing, where you are sort of released from the normative ways in which you might view moving images into a more invitational manner, where you participate in making your own film by the way in which you navigate the space or choose an angle to intersect the way that you may look at the various sequences in the film. And this has been one of the most thrilling ways of being able to work in a gallery context as opposed to a kind of more normative or traditional classical kind of cinema setting.
So do you want to explain physically what it is that's in the installation? You have 9 screens, and explain the sound and sort of what to expect when you walk in.
Well, the premise of the work is that I've been making sort of multi-screen works for a number of years, and I think one of the things that I wanted to do in this work, a work which is very much takes its impetus from a story of migrancy, where 23 Chinese cockle shell pickers died in the north of England in 2004 when they came, as it were, across a kind of tidal current which operated in a way which they weren't familiar with. And because of their lack of language, their lack of knowledge of how the sea worked in this location, they drowned. And this caused a kind of national scandal because it exposed the kind of conditions. And in 2006, I worked with a poet called Wang Ping, went back to the location, and in 2007 she produced this poem, and then I made my first trips to China. And I have to say, when I got to China, it in a way dumbfounded me, because it was a completely different sort of country from what I expected to see. And also, when I went to the Fujian province, I realized that people from this area in China had been traveling since the 15th century. And so the question of traveling and of movement became part of the language for making the piece itself. So in my mind's eye, the idea of the 9 screens is the fact that we ourselves, in a way, make a sort of journey in watching as a kind of narrative and series of images unfolds over time, because this work is 50 minutes long. And the work is also a collaboration, really, between many sort of artistic voices in China: Maggie Chong, Zhao Tao, Gong Fugong, master calligrapher, along with many technicians. And one of the thrilling things about making the work was really being able to work with this kind of energy in China. And I keep comparing this a little bit to the Olympic Games, where Britain's doing the Olympic Games in 2012, and you know it's not going to be anything near as good as the Chinese Olympic Games, you know. And part of that is really to do with the fact there is this incredible energy that exists in China. And I really think this is something which seeped into making the piece itself, this incredible desire and this opportunity to participate in a work which was in a way very artistically, creatively different from the things they would ordinarily make. Also, some of my conversations involved talking to people and artists like Yang Fudong, who, as you know, with his work also makes multi-screen works, and he was very, very kind and helped me making the work and also participated in performing in the work. And anybody that knows Yang Fudong, you know, who is of course the most important video artist working in China today, you know, is incredibly shy. So it was fantastic that he allowed me to kind of work with him and to collaborate in this manner.
Now, a lot of people have asked you whether you had any resistance, what kind of reception you had when you arrived in China and you worked with the artists, being an outsider. How did you navigate that situation?
Well, I think one of the things that became clear during my research was really the fact that China had its own position about things generally. And one of the first things which I encountered when I went to China is that I went to a biennale, the Gwangju Biennale, of which its title was called Farewell to Post-Colonialism. And of course, being a post-colonial artist myself, I thought, what is this message that's being addressed here? And in a way, one of the things that was really fascinating was really, I think, this sort of ambivalence and refusal to be seen, as it were, by the West in this kind of construction, you know, that they were repudiating this kind of paradigm. And of course, China is the Middle Kingdom. And I think there was this way in which sort of, at least in this beginning of a kind of rethinking paradigms, a way in which sort of one was sort of having to rethink one's own practice and way of looking at culture, looking at art. And so what developed really after the piece was made was this sort of dialogue between myself and Gao Ximin, who is a very important curator working in China today, where he interviewed me, and we had this debate about Europeans romanticizing China, and also a debate really about the question of technology and multi-screen aesthetics as a sort of language, which he had been very involved with in working with Yang Fudong. So there's this sort of kind of exchange that developed, and I think it ended up with him inviting me to show the single-screen version of the work for the Shanghai Biennale. So I felt like that was like a sort of, an acknowledgement of some kind, really, and in a way, a sort of beginning. And here you have his title of the essay which appears in this catalogue. This is what you're looking at here, which I'm showing to you. So there was this kind of exchange that took place, I think, and hopefully one which is ongoing, because of course the Chinese art world is yet another sort of space really for sort of thinking about contemporary art now.
So we're getting the 5-minute signal.
We are? Okay. That's good. Maybe there are some questions.
I think we should open it up to some questions. Yes? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I think
how many people were involved altogether in the project?
Well, I think I maybe have some credits here at the end. These are the people who died in Morecambe Bay. This is from a newspaper report which I collected in 2004. And I mean, there was over a crew of 100 people involved. And I have to say that the sort of the collaborative kind of nature of the project was really awesome, and I think it resulted, you know, in a work which was really, I mean, which in a way, if 10,000 Waves is perhaps one of the most important works I've made, it's really because of that sort of energy and talent as well, artistically, creatively, that is there in China. Because if I shot a movie myself, I don't think anybody would come to see it, you know, so you're very much dependent on sort of your cinematographer and your art director, the performances that you are able to achieve. And of course, somebody like Maggie Chong, I mean, you don't direct somebody like Maggie Chong, you know, she is Maggie Chong, because when you're working with her, there's a way that you know, the camera starts rolling and she, you know, tells you really kind of what to do. She's such an amazing performer.
Yes?
Hi, I'm Michael McLeod from Denver, Colorado. The works at the Bass Museum are vibrant in color and are representative, I'm told, of your efforts over the past 10 years or so. Some of your earlier works, like Looking for Langston, recognize the value of black and white cinematography. And I wonder if you can speak to both the your use of black and white and the future of black and white cinematography and photography, whether by you or by others, for creative expression.
My God, that's so interesting that you asked that question, because, of course, in 1989, I made a work called Looking for Langston, which is the work which, in a way, got me familiarized with American audiences. It was a work that was shown in the New York Film Festival, and it's a black and white 45-minute film, a drama documentary, and in that film, I was very much in conversation with black and white photography, the history of black and white photography. So photographers like Roy Kandavar, and also I'm thinking of that amazing black photographer that photographed Harlem in the 20s and 30s, Van der Zee, and also I was thinking really about the role of black and white cinema, film noir, and of course you're absolutely right. In this exhibition, I'm very much connected to the idea of a painterly approach to images, and the question of color is really very important in my work. But I have to say that in my next work, it's probably going to be in black and white, because I think there's a way in which, and the reason why that might be is because I saw an amazing piece of work by Yang Fudong called Cloud, Mist, and Separation. And one of the amazing things about this work is that it was shot on 35mm black and white film, and it was also projected in the museum on these amazing 35mm black and white projectors. And he had two projectionists who were basically serving and spooling the films like a sort of performance. And to see 35mm black and white film projected, I mean, it's just heavenly. And I think, you know, that we have lost that experience of black and white cinema as a projected sort of image. And I think that's something that I perhaps might like to come back to in some sort of way. Of course, this might cause a bit of a headache curatorially, you know, the hiring of a projectionist and a 35mm black and white projection apparatus in a space, to have 10 of them or something like that. But yes, I mean, basically sort of, I think there's a way that black and white, and understanding how black and white works in a tonality always is a good basis for understanding color.
There was a question around here somewhere.
What type of crew do you travel with? I'm sorry, I'm Jamie Skidler from Miami Beach. What type of crew do you travel with to do these projects, and how long does this project take?
Are you talking directly about 10,000 Ways?
Yes.
Well, actually, kind of we would, I mean, myself and the producer, Maggie Still, who works in a company called Xanadu, who specializes actually in making films in China, and is the only company in the UK that has worked consistently with China over the last 15 years. We were the only kind of non-Chinese sort of members of the crew, so we worked completely with a Chinese film crew, and I was able to do that because of Maggie Still's very significant relationship with China, and also because of Wang Fang, the producer, who's absolutely amazing, who works as a kind of producer in China as well. And so that was a sort of experiment which I think, you know, as I said, was really very, very beneficial to the kind of creative energy of the work.
Any other question?
Okay.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
I think that's probably it.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you
everybody,
very
very
much.
much.